The movie starts with Woo Yun playing a school game of football. As he runs with the ball in his arms while passing by opponents from the other team, he also speaks about the concept of impossibility. Turning impossible into possible is difficult and can cause you to gain scars. However, scars aren't always a bad thing, and they can also be a sign of strength. There's only one thing for Woo Yun that is powerful enough to help him overcome his challenges: love. After scoring a touchdown, he reunites with his girlfriend, one of the cheerleaders for the football team, and leans in to give her a kiss. Of course, this is all just Woo Yun's wishful thinking, and he wakes back up to reality. Now, as a physical education teacher at a high school, he urges his students to hurry back and start another game of badminton again. Afterwards, Woo Yun returns to his desk in the teacher's office room only to find a card sent to him by a woman named Hwan Seung-hee. He recalls how he never knew of the surname Hwan until he met Seung-hee. And so the movie takes us back to when Woo Yun met this so-called Hwan Seung-hee. It's June of 2005. Woo Yun gets reprimanded by his teacher for getting into a fight earlier that day. As Woo Yun is penalized in the teacher's office room, a new student enters alongside a teacher. Her name is Hwan Seung-hee, and she's a senior transferring from Jeonju. Of course, Seung-hee immediately captures Woo Yun's attention, and he suddenly forgets about his punishment. After Seung-hee finishes her discussion with her teacher, Woo Yun creeps up to Seung-hee and introduces himself to her. However, all Seung-hee can notice is the crack in Woo Yun's pants from all the beating he received from his teacher earlier. Woo Yun grows embarrassed and crawls away. News about Seung-hee quickly spreads throughout the school, and she becomes the new it girl. All the guys, including the school's bully Taiki, shows interest in her. However, Seung-hee dislikes all the attention and wants to escape from all the mess for once. One day after school, Seung-hee invites Woo Yun to go with her on a quickie. Woo Yun assumes she's referring to some sexual activity, as that's how he's always interpreted the word, but Seung-hee is referring to something totally different. She was talking about a quick trip to get some Korean food tteokbokki. The two make their grand escape and head to a small street food vendor to grab some rice cakes. Later on that night, Woo Yun stops by a convenience store to buy something before heading home with Seung-hee. He then brings up the topic of the term quickie and is surprised when he learns that Seung-hee had her first quickie in the 8th grade. She must be so dirty then. Of course, Seung-hee wasn't referring to anything dirty and grows suspicious of the item that Woo Yun bought at the store. Unlike what she had assumed, it wasn't cigarettes he bought, it was condoms. She gives him a good slap in the face and pokes fun at him afterwards for his misinterpretation of the slang word. The next day at school, Seung-hee teases Woo Yun about the slang term while walking back to her classroom. When she does arrive at her classroom, she finds school bully Taiki sitting at her desk and preparing her a surprise. Not wanting to interact with Taiki, Seung-hee prepares to skip class once again, so she exits the school building. On the way to the school wall where she last escaped with Woo Yun, Seung-hee encounters Woo Yun fighting once again with another student. However, she has other things to worry about, so she ignores him and attempts to climb over the wall. Unfortunately, Singhee's a little too short and can't reach the top of the wall. Thankfully, Wooyeon rescues her just in time as Singhee is about to fall, and together the two make their escape. The two head out for another outing of rice cakes, but this time they are accompanied by school bully Taiki and his team. Wooyeon makes a deal with Singhee. He'll stop fighting if he becomes Singhee's boyfriend. He's been fighting as a way to get revenge for all the bullying he's suffered the past few years. If Singhee tells everyone he's her boyfriend, he'll stop the fighting. Singhee quickly agrees once Taiki approaches her. She uses her relationship with Wooyeon as an excuse to drive Taiki away. Later on that night, Wooyeon updates his best friend Jinnam on the news. He's given up his revenge scheme for love instead. Wooyeon then notices an injury on Jinnam's face. Jinnam explains that his dad beat him up while they were all watching a drama together. He misheard one of the characters and thought the character made a sexual reference when really he didn't. That didn't fly by Dad, of course, and Dad beat Jinnam up. The next day at school, Wooyeon sits with Singhee during lunch. This doesn't sit well with Taiki, and he throws a milk carton all the way across the room at Wooyeon. Wooyeon doesn't mind the attack and even drinks out of the milk carton that was thrown. Later on that day, Singhee and Wooyeon go out on another escape again. However, the Chibaki shop that they frequent isn't opened that day, so they wait outside while waiting for the rain to pass. There, Singhee opens up that she wants to become an artist painter, but probably wouldn't be able to make a lot of money off of it. She also encourages Wooyeon to study or else he's going to waste his life away. Just then, their teacher discovers them and chases after the couple. Wooyeon and Singhee make a run for it and manage to successfully hide from their teacher. That night, Singhee and Wooyeon wash their clothes at Wooyeon's place. While Wooyeon suggests they watch a movie, Singhee takes the time to look around his bedroom. She finds some Playboy magazines lying around and suggests that they can watch something erotic instead. This throws Wooyeon off, and he finally notices the pile of magazines in Singhee's hands. He quickly retrieves them, but that's not the end. Singhee's curiosity gets the best of her and she asks Wooyeon about masturbation. When asked when exactly he started masturbating, Wooyeon throws out a time, but Singhee was asking for an age. Wooyeon drops Singhee near her house after they finish washing their clothes. The next day at school, Taiki confronts Wooyeon and wants to fight him. He wants to maintain his position as the strongest one around the school. To keep his promise with Singhee, Wooyeon doesn't fight Taiki back nor throw a punch at him. He instead just receives the punches by Taiki even if it hurts badly. Singhee herself witnesses the fight, but doesn't do anything about it. However, she does worry about him later on that night when the two go out for some late-night snacks and seems proud of Wooyeon for being able to keep his promise with her. Wooyeon assumes he'll receive a kiss from Singhee as a reward, but all he receives is a weird stare from Singhee instead. When they finish their snacks, the couple walks back to their homes. However, Singhee freaks out when she sees a mini-truck driving around in the neighborhood. She quickly panics and turns around to avoid being seen by the truck. This heavily impacts Singhee's mood and she begins to act oddly the next day at school. To cheer her up, Wooyeon sneaks into the school's media room and performs to Singhee's favorite song. All the teachers panic at the music and rush their way to the room, but the students are well prepared. They lock the doors carefully so that Wooyeon can continue his performance for Singhee. And it works, as Singhee does begin to feel better upon hearing the song. Wooyeon is excited more than ever. However, he grows worried when Singhee doesn't appear at school the next day, or ever again. One night, while walking around in the neighborhood, he finds a group of people crowding in front of a salon store. When he approaches the shop, Wooyeon finally understands why Singhee hasn't been at school. He finds her cleaning the shattered pieces of glass from the shop while her father lays drunkenly not too far away. Singhee screams at Wooyeon to leave upon making eye contact with him, in which he does. Singhee then contacts Wooyeon a few days later and bids farewell with him via phone call. She and her mother had been running away from her dangerous father, but he quickly found them again in the neighborhood. They'll be running away again in hopes that Dad won't be able to find them. With that, Singhee wishes for Wooyeon to take care of himself and gets onto the travel bus with her mother. They leave the town. In the present, Wooyeon cheers up a crying student in the bathroom who's upset over a rejection by a girl. Wooyeon shares with the student a story of when he used to fry chicken to make a living since he assumed he wouldn't make it into college. It was there at the fried chicken restaurant where he met a customer who he deeply fell in love with, but ultimately rejected him because he was a college reject. The student wouldn't want to go through the same thing, right? Upon graduating from high school, Jinnam gets accepted into a college in Seoul. Wooyeon has no plans of attending college until he discovers a picture of Singhee hidden inside of a university ad. Wooyeon immediately changes his mind and studies another year in high school in hopes that he'll be accepted into the same university as Singhee. His parents are in disbelief at the fact that their son wants to go to college, but they don't stop him. They, as well as Jinnam, help Wooyeon and give him all their support. All the hard work and studying eventually pays off as Wooyeon gets accepted into Hankook University. Wooyeon has no other plans than to find Singhee when he arrives at the school. He looks around rice cake shops hoping that Singhee will be at one of them. Though Wooyeon has no luck in finding Singhee at a rice cake booth, he does eventually find her nearby one. The two catch up with each other as Singhee tapes promotional flyers of her tutoring services around the neighborhood. She's majoring in fashion design and eventually wants to start her own brand. Wooyeon moves in at the same boarding house where Singhee also lives. He and Jinnam join a gathering with the other housemates and invite Singhee to join them. However, she has other plans and confesses to Wooyeon that she has a boyfriend. She wanted to make things clear with him so that things wouldn't get awkward. Wooyeon pretends to be fine with the news, but is bummed out on the inside. Jinnam helps enlighten Wooyeon. Wooyeon only has to worry about competing against Singhee's boyfriend. Not all hope is lost for Wooyeon, and he attempts to regain the love of his high school sweetheart. He first decides to get to know Seung-hee's boyfriend, who also happens to be the captain of the school football team. Woo-yeon and Jin-nam both try out for the football team and receive lessons from Seung-hee's boyfriend Yoonjun himself. During break time, Seung-hee approaches Yoonjun and hands him a drink. Watching the couple interact angers Woo-yeon, and he walks away with Jin-nam. Since Seung-hee is taken, Seung-hee's friend Sojung expresses interest in Woo-yeon. However, Woo-yeon isn't interested in anyone else but Seung-hee. As the two walk around in the neighborhood, they come across an elderly couple loading boxes into their car. Seung-hee and Woo-yeon volunteer to help load the heavy boxes into the car for them. That night, Woo-yeon and his friends download some porn to watch on Woo-yeon's computer. They are interrupted by a sudden and alarming visit by the police, who they assume tracked their IP address for illegal downloading. The police take Woo-yeon as well as Seung-hee with them to the station for questioning. While Seung-hee and Woo-yeon debate on whether to be honest with the police or not, the police are studying an entirely different case involving the elderly couple they were helping earlier. The police and students continue to misunderstand each other. Woo-yeon assumes they are still talking about porn while the police wants the grandpa's contact information. Seung-hee is clueless as to what grandpa the police are referring to, since has passed away when she was a little kid. Eventually, the two are put into separate jail cells for the time being until the case is cleared. They start laughing once they realize the ridiculous situation that they are in, and take some time to catch up with each other. More than anything, Woo-yeon wants to know why Seung-hee fell in love with Yoonjun. She explains that it took her only 3 seconds to fall in love with him during their first interaction. Woo-yeon's jealousy intensifies when he overhears Seung-hee and Yoonjun talking in her room upstairs that night. He complains to the owner of the boarding house about a couple in the room upstairs and how he can't study because of them. The owner assumes Woo-yeon is referring to her and grows angry. The man she's having a relationship with jumps out from the room and apologizes to Woo-yeon for bothering his studies. The owner lashes out at Woo-yeon for suddenly being a burden and inconvenience, but Woo-yeon wasn't referring to her. He was complaining about Seung-hee and Yoonjun. All the noise and chaos triggers everyone else to check out what's going on. While Woo-yeon is endlessly yelled at by the owner, Seung-hee and Yoonjun watch from their entrance door. While Jin-nam and neighbor Seupyo are occupied with talking to girls, Woo-yeon has plans of celebrating Seung-hee's birthday. He buys a bouquet of flowers and intends on giving them to Seung-hee. However, Seung-hee is spending her special day with her boyfriend. At the boarding house, Woo-yeon witnesses Seung-hee receiving a necklace from Yoonjun as a gift and grows angry. Seung-hee too notices Woo-yeon watching from not too far away, but doesn't say anything. In an act of rage, Woo-yeon throws the gift he got for Seung-hee into Yoonjun's car and runs away. Fast forward a few months later, and it's September of 2007. Woo-yeon hasn't been the same since Seung-hee's birthday. While laying around on a bench at school, Seung-hee approaches Woo-yeon. She fixes his worn-out shirt for him and asks that he stop ignoring her. Later on at school, Woo-yeon is wandering around in the library when he overhears Yoonjun talking with another girl nearby. Yoonjun has plans to travel to Europe and invites the girl to go with him. At the football championship game, Woo-yeon reveals the news to Seung-hee. Yoonjun has made a bet with Seung-hee that he'll take her to Europe if they win the game, but Woo-yeon informs Seung-hee that the Europe trip is just an excuse for Yoonjun to go on the trip with the other girl. Seung-hee doesn't listen to Woo-yeon nor believe in his statements. Their school eventually wins the football game thanks to Woo-yeon's brilliant 3-second play that landed him a touchdown. Although the rest of the team rejoices at the win, Woo-yeon immediately punches Yoonjun in the face after scoring. Woo-yeon is eventually dismissed from the university. While walking out of the school, he comes across Seung-hee. The two walk past each other without exchanging a word. Fast forward 5 years later, and it's now 2012. Woo-yeon and Jun-nam still keep in contact with the same two neighbors at the boarding house from back in college. Unlike before, Woo-yeon is now in a relationship with a woman named Min-kyung. He also works as a personal trainer at the gym. While passing out flyers on the streets, he once again comes across Seung-hee. He follows her into a studio and watches as she poses for the camera. The two catch up once again and update each other on what they've been up to. Seung-hee's been doing some part-time modeling gigs to earn some extra cash while Woo-yeon is now in a relationship. Seung-hee herself isn't in one, but she doesn't mind that she's single. She'd rather be occupied with work instead. Speaking of work, Seung-hee has CF shoots to go to but needs someone to take her. Woo-yeon then volunteers to drive her to the locations so that she can attend her CF shootings. After a long and tiring day of shoots, Woo-yeon finally drops Seung-hee off back home. After paying Woo-yeon, Seung-hee prepares to head inside her house. However, Woo-yeon hands her a flyer of a designer contest and encourages her to sign up for it. All her modeling and commercial gigs are cool, but her original dream was to be an artist. Seeing the flyer reminds Seung-hee of her dreams, and she looks through all her old drawings that night. 2 days later, Woo-yeon drives Seung-hee out for another CF shooting. On the way there, he receives a text message from Min-kyung, but he ignores it since he's driving. Seung-hee then questions why Woo-yeon didn't contact her during his military service. He stutters and makes up a number of excuses for the lack of contact. Seung-hee receives a phone call from the director of the CF shooting. Seung-hee's role has been cut from the shoot, so she will no longer be needed. Woo-yeon stops the car so that Seung-hee can have some time to process the unfortunate announcement. He takes her to a luxurious location to cheer her up, but the place is locked. Just like the old times, she climbs up on him to climb over the gate. Seung-hee admits that she thought about Woo-yeon frequently back then. After teasing him and recalling their memories, Woo-yeon chases after Seung-hee and grabs a hold of her. The two freeze and stare into each other's eyes. Woo-yeon leans in for a kiss, but Seung-hee avoids it. It was Yoonjun back in college, and now it's Min-kyung in the present. Timing is everything when it comes to love and relationships. Unfortunately, the timing isn't right for Woo-yeon and Seung-hee. Woo-yeon wants to start over with Seung-hee, but she refuses. She doesn't want to rekindle the same love she and Wooyeon had back in high school. She's moved on and she's now a different person. Wooyeon hangs on until the very end though and ends his relationship with Min Kyung, but Seung-hee isn't interested. At a CF shooting, Seung-hee and Wooyeon confront each other about the issue until a dangerous situation ensues. Wooyeon faints upon protecting Seung-hee from a falling door that construction workers on the rooftop of the building accidentally dropped. Wooyeon is admitted to the hospital and Seung-hee is right there next to his side. Wooyeon's just glad Seung-hee isn't hurt even if it meant that he is. Seung-hee then gives Wooyeon a surprise kiss. Wooyeon enjoys the kiss though, and the two go back to rekindling the relationship right from where they left off in high school. Of course, the two are much older and now have different responsibilities and commitments. However, they are very much still the same and remain together through the different seasons. Unfortunately, because of his injuries, Wooyeon fails to land a job as a physical education teacher. Seung-hee blames herself for Wooyeon's situation, but he doesn't blame her. He hugs her tightly and holds Seung-hee in her arms while she tears up. Seung-hee and Wooyeon go on another trip. Seung-hee informs Wooyeon about her trip to Belgium that her work company is sending her off to. She'll most likely be there for 2 until 3 years. Unlike what she expected, Wooyeon doesn't react when she spills the news. He permits her to go instead of holding her back. Seung-hee's father passes away, so she holds a funeral for him. After paying him his respects, Wooyeon stays by Seung-hee's side to comfort her. But things aren't so bright for Wooyeon, and he begins to feel doubtful. Maybe he shouldn't have met Seung-hee. It's because of her that he failed to become a teacher and is in the unfortunate situation he is in right now. Seung-hee overhears Wooyeon's harsh words outside of the funeral house and breaks up with Wooyeon. Just like her dad did with her mom, Wooyeon too blames Seung-hee for ruining his life. She enters the funeral house and wails uncontrollably. Wooyeon apologizes to Seung-hee and attempts to make things up with her. However, Seung-hee has no plans in forgiving Wooyeon. She confirms her trip to Belgium and will move away to start anew. The absence of their couple ring on her finger indicates that she wants to end things with Wooyeon. A few years later, Wooyeon lands the physical education teacher position like how he had wanted. Instead of lecturing about physical education, Wooyeon entertains his class by telling his students about his first love story with Seung-hee. Speaking of Seung-hee, Wooyeon eventually reunites with her in the present. She stops by his school to inform him that she's getting married, hence the wedding invitation that Wooyeon received at the beginning of the movie. Just like all the other times, Wooyeon throws a fit and gets drunk after hearing the news. To get things off of his mind, he suggests he and his friends can go somewhere isolated for a while. They ride a boat and decide to fish out in the middle of a lake. While rumbling around, Wooyeon finds a drawing that Seung-hee had drawn for him a while back. He tears up upon staring at the drawing and changes his mind. He's going to attend Seung-hee's wedding. So Wooyeon and his friends devise a plan on the day of Seung-hee's wedding. While Wooyeon's friends prevent people from entering Seung-hee's room, Wooyeon takes the chance to visit the bride himself. He finally expresses his honest thoughts to her and realizes that he was wrong the entire time. Wooyeon now understands that meeting Seung-hee was a blessing. He now has a good and stable job and has 3 reliable friends he met in college thanks to her. His life's only gotten better ever since they've met. Seung-hee too feels the same way towards Wooyeon. He was always by her side when she was going through hardships or rough times. They shake hands with each other as a way to settle their relationship once and for all. After this day, they'll remain as good friends and nothing more. The wedding begins and Seung-hee walks down the aisle all by herself. Wooyeon watches her in awe and even makes eye contact with Seung-hee as she makes her way to the groom. After a few seconds, Wooyeon leaves the wedding reception and exits the room. On the wedding day of his first love, he was able to come to terms with the fact that he will never end up with her. However, it was thanks to her that he has found meaning in his life. And for that, Wooyeon is grateful.